Please, Natalie, pay my husband for his work. We need money for our child's medicine. I'm begging you, at least part of the amount. We've known each other for so long, we're friends. Why are you deceiving us?" sobbed Victoria, Natalie's longtime friend, over the phone. Her call woke Natalie early in the morning, and in her groggy state, she didn't immediately understand why her old friend was crying so desperately and demanding money. "Victoria, wait, I don't understand anything. Do you need help? Is one of the kids sick? Let me bring you the medicine. Calm down and tell me what you need." Natalie, or as she was respectfully called at work, Natalie Elizabeth, had been a manager for a long time. She had learned to speak to people in such a way that even the most unruly would immediately quiet down at the steely tone in her voice. Victoria stopped crying and obediently dictated a long list that included not only medicine, but also groceries. Natalie couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Listen, why didn't your husband buy potatoes and milk? Anthony's a grown man, he's in his 40s. It's time he learned to go to the store, especially since he knows one of the kids is sick, and your baby is only 3 months old. He could help out more around the house." Victoria's voice trembled with tears again. "He doesn't have time, Natalie, and we don't have money for food. You haven't paid him for the work he did on your cottage. Why are you blaming my husband? You bought a huge house, and now you don't have money to fix it, so you're saving money at our expense. On my children, because of you, we're starving. Stop! No more tears. I don't understand, Victoria. What money do we owe your husband?" But Natalie didn't want to deal with Victoria's tears. "All right, we'll figure it out later. Take care of the kids, and I'll go to the pharmacy and the supermarket now. I'll be at your place in an hour, and you can tell me what this debt is about." As promised, an hour later, Natalie was sitting in Victoria's small kitchen, listening to her friend's unexpected news. Victoria was trying to cook lunch with a baby in her arms, while also giving medicine to her 3-year-old son, who was whining from a sore throat. "Well, your husband Stephen and my Anthony have been friends since the army. Stephen offered Anthony some side work. My husband told me you bought a big house and are renovating it. Stephen asked him to help out as a favor since we've been friends for so long, to make it cheaper and do a good job. They need to do the electrical work in your new cottage, and Anthony knows how to do that. He agreed right away. We really need the money right now. His boss has been cutting his bonuses, and he doesn't appreciate him at all." Victoria, exhausted from the kids crying, started sobbing again. "Anthony's been working for you every evening for a month. Sometimes he stays late into the night, and you haven't paid him a cent. Stephen said he'd pay him later, but right now there's no money because they spent it on materials, and then you got sick. But you're fine, I can see that. Natalie, I've been patient for a month, thinking you were having problems. But today my oldest got sick, and we have no money for medicine. The fridge is empty. I couldn't take it anymore, so I called you. Natalie, this is inhumane. How can you not pay Anthony for his work? We've known each other for so long." Victoria broke down in tears, and the children started crying too. As if to add to Victoria's problems, the boiling potatoes on the stove overflowed, filling the kitchen with the awful smell of burnt food. Natalie frowned. It was hard to have a conversation in the middle of this chaos. "All right, Victoria, put the kids to bed and take a shower. I'll handle this. We'll talk when you've cleared your head." While Victoria dealt with the kids, Natalie quickly aired out the kitchen, cleaned up the mess, made strong tea for her friend, and prepared some sandwiches. After her shower, a tearful Victoria gratefully sat down to eat. She couldn't even remember the last time she had eaten at the table alone in silence. Finally, Natalie could calmly explain everything. "It's true, we bought the cottage 2 months ago, but it wasn't Stephen and I who bought it. I bought it with the inheritance I got from my grandmother. Yes, Stephen is doing the renovations himself. But I've set aside money for all the work and materials because I don't like living in debt, and I know how to manage money. And this is the first I've heard that your husband has been working at the cottage for a month, and that we owe him money for the renovations." Victoria innocently suggested, Natalie, maybe Stephen just forgot to tell you. Anthony's been there almost every night, working on the electrical wiring, and all weekend too. I'm so tired. The kids in the house are all on me. Natalie gently but firmly stopped her friend. Victoria, first of all, your husband is an auto electrician. He works on cars, not construction. And second, the electrical work in the cottage is fine. I bought the house almost finished. We just need to replace the windows on the second floor, lay laminate flooring, and put up wallpaper. All the lights and outlets were installed and working. I checked everything myself before buying it. Victoria dragged out in surprise. But how? I don't understand. Why did Anthony tell me he's working for you, and that you haven't paid him? What's he doing at the cottage every day? Maybe it's a surprise for you, and that's why you don't know. I'd like to think it's a nice surprise. Natalie didn't want to upset her friend with her suspicions, so she just warned her. All right, I'll talk to Stephen and find out what they're up to. Don't say anything to Anthony about your call or our meeting. Don't worry about the groceries and medicine. You don't have to pay me back. Tell your husband you borrowed money from the neighbors, and he'd better start paying it back. He can make babies, but he can't support his family. Out on the street, Natalie called her husband. Stephen reacted strangely to her unexpected questions. He started mumbling uncertainly. Natalie, don't get mad. I gave Anthony the keys as a favor. He asked for them for one evening. But Stephen's uncertain tone only made Natalie more suspicious. Wait, how could you give Anthony the keys if you've been there every night doing renovations? You haven't missed a single day in 2 months. And why would he need the cottage? Don't tell me you don't know. At his wife's steely tone, Stephen immediately confessed, well, he had a date with a woman. Natalie, don't say anything to Victoria. It doesn't mean anything. Every man needs a break from family life sometimes, especially since they have little kids, and Victoria's always busy with them. She doesn't pay any attention to him. Exactly. She just got out of the hospital after giving birth. She needs help, and he's out having fun under your cover. Natalie was furious. Stephen tried to smooth things over. Don't interfere in their family, Natalie. Don't tell Victoria anything. I know you. You'll start laying down the law. Just think, if they get divorced, where will Victoria go with 2 kids? The apartment is in Anthony's name, and she's on maternity leave. Natalie immediately remembered how desperately Victoria had cried in the kitchen surrounded by her children. She decided not to add to Victoria's troubles and kept her thoughts to herself, only asking suspiciously, then why did Anthony lie to Victoria about the money? She thinks we owe them a large sum. Stephen hurriedly defended himself. I don't know anything about that, Natalie. I'll meet Anthony tonight and give him a piece of my mind. All right. Natalie unexpectedly agreed easily. She casually asked her husband, what about the materials? Have they been delivered? When will you finish? Oh, honey, the store messed up again. Can you believe it? They delivered our order to the wrong address. Of course, they'll make it right, but we'll have to wait. The new batch is on its way. It's such a mess, but I'll handle it, I promise. I'll go there today and sort it out. All right, I'm in a hurry. I've got a lot to do. Don't wait for me tonight. I'll be stuck with the renovations again. Stephen hung up, and Natalie was deep in thought. She had a feeling something wasn't right. When she had bought the unfinished house, Stephen had volunteered to do the renovations himself. He had convinced her that they could save money by doing it themselves and doing it right. Although Stephen had been spending every night and weekend at the cottage, Natalie had been pleased. He was so diligent, buying materials himself, doing everything with his own hands. True, the work was progressing slowly, but Stephen had explained that the store kept delaying the delivery of the materials they had paid for. But after her conversation with Victoria, Natalie wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Both husbands were behaving suspiciously, disappearing for days under the pretext of working on the cottage. But the electrical work was already done, and there wasn't much to renovate. The materials still hadn't arrived. And they're both lying through their teeth. Natalie's intuition told her something was wrong, and she had learned to trust it after years of working with people. She decided to check on the two would-be handymen and see what they were really up to at the cottage. First, she went to the building supply store. She'd hurry them along with the delivery. She was good at that. But the store manager shook his head in surprise. "You must be mistaken. The order for your address hasn't been paid for, so we haven't delivered anything." "Wait." Natalie opened her online banking app. "Look, my husband withdrew money for the materials at the beginning of the summer." The manager couldn't hide his confusion. "You'll have to ask your husband about the money in your account. On our end, everything's in order. We deliver any order within a week." Natalie suddenly realized she sounded just like Victoria, blaming everyone but her own husband for their troubles. She left the store boiling with anger. So, this was how her husband was doing the renovations. He'd been deceiving her for 2 months, and she had been admiring his handiwork. Natalie decided to drive to the cottage and see for herself what was going on. As she was pulling out of the store parking lot, Natalie spotted a familiar figure out of the corner of her eye. Her husband, Stephen, was standing by the store's service entrance with a lavish bouquet of flowers. Well, so this was how he was spending his time renovating. Natalie hit the brakes to watch her husband. Stephen was waiting for someone by the service entrance, clearly not working on the cottage. A crowd of shoppers pushing their carts shielded Natalie's car from Stephen's view, but Natalie had a clear view as a young woman in a short dress flitted out of the service door, kissed Stephen passionately on the lips, and eagerly accepted the bouquet. After a quick embrace, the couple disappeared into a car and sped off through the other exit. Natalie was in such shock that she froze at the wheel, oblivious to the honking cars behind her demanding she move. Coming to her senses, she called Victoria. "Victoria, we need to go to the cottage right now. Our husbands are deceiving us." But Victoria's response shocked Natalie as much as Stephen's betrayal. "I already know Anthony's seeing another woman. I just don't know how to go on." Victoria's voice was dull and lifeless, as if she had lost all her strength. "I'm on my way. Tell me everything." Natalie snapped out of it immediately. She was furious. But unlike Victoria, Natalie wasn't about to cry and suffer. She was burning with a desire for revenge. For the second time that day, Natalie found herself in Victoria's kitchen. Victoria looked sick with grief. She barely spoke above a whisper and didn't mention the children who were quiet in the next room, as if sensing their mother's distress. Victoria told her friend how she had discovered the awful truth. "You told me to keep quiet, but I decided to talk to Anthony. Why is he lying to me? He had the day off today, but he left last night for a side job and didn't even come home. I dressed the kids and walked to the cottage with the stroller. The door was open, so I carried the baby upstairs, and there was Anthony in bed with our downstairs neighbor, hugging each other." Victoria shook her head, as if trying to erase the disgusting image from her mind. "She's 15 years older than me and goes through men like gloves. What does Anthony see in her? They had flowers, champagne, fruit on the table. And at home, we only have the potatoes and bread you bought. I don't even have money for the cheapest apples for the kids. I can't remember the last time he gave me flowers. I don't understand why he's doing this to me. I was so shocked that I didn't wake them. I just left quietly." "You should have made a scene right there. What's wrong with you, Victoria?" Natalie was so outraged she couldn't sit still. But Victoria just shrugged helplessly. "I didn't want to argue in front of the kids. And what can I do? I'm so scared of being alone with the children. Maybe if I keep quiet, Anthony will come back to the family, and everything will be like before." But Natalie wasn't about to suffer in silence. She wasn't going to let anyone make a fool of her. She suddenly narrowed her eyes. A plan for revenge was forming in her mind. "You know what? I think I've figured out how to teach these cheaters a lesson." Natalie slammed her fist on the table so hard the cups rattled. "We'll give them a surprise they'll never forget. They'll think twice before messing around again." The next day, the women put Natalie's plan into action. First, they targeted the mistresses. At the building supply store, Natalie found the young woman who had so eagerly jumped into her husband's car the day before. Natalie approached her and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Miss, I take it you're my husband Stephen's mistress. I saw you with him yesterday." Shoppers and staff turned to watch the scene. The young woman turned beet red and tried to deny it. "You must be mistaken. I don't know any Stephen." But Natalie wasn't about to stop. She sneered. "I'm not as young as you, and I don't wear skirts above my navel anymore. But my eyes are just fine, so I saw perfectly well the gorgeous bouquet he gave you. Don't worry, I'm not going to hit you. In fact, I wanted to warn you that my husband gave you another kind of bouquet. Stephen's got an STD, so I suggest you run to the hospital before it's too late." The young woman's eyes widened in horror. She squealed and bolted for the back room, leaving the onlookers stunned. Natalie hurried to her car to enjoy the final act of her revenge. From her car window, she watched as the tearful young mistress got into a taxi. Her co-workers, who had seen her off, immediately started gossiping after her hasty departure. Well, Volkov's in trouble." "No kidding. Ran off to get treated for her married man's bouquet. She'll probably get fired after this scandal." Natalie smiled. Her revenge was working. Meanwhile, Victoria, with her baby in her arms, knocked on her downstairs neighbor's door. The neighbor, seeing Anthony's wife, tightened her silk robe and asked nervously, "Victoria, what brings you here?" Victoria sighed dramatically. "Oh, I just wanted to borrow some sugar to make porridge for the kids. You see, my husband caught some nasty disease, and now he's getting treated. All our money's going to medicine, and there's no hope. It's a lifelong condition. Oh, I don't know how we'll go on." The neighbor gasped and slammed the door in Victoria's face. But Victoria wasn't upset. On the contrary, she happily hurried upstairs. At the window, she laughed as she watched her neighbor rush toward the hospital in a panic, splashing through puddles without a care. Victoria called Natalie. "Natalie, it's done, just like you planned. She's running to get tested and she's on the phone, probably calling my husband to give him a piece of her mind." Natalie smiled triumphantly. "I told you I'd make those cheaters pay." That evening, it was time to deal with the unfaithful husbands. Natalie invited Victoria and Anthony over for dinner, making sure Stephen wouldn't miss the gathering. After a hearty meal, the men relaxed, joking and winking at each other, completely unaware of the surprise awaiting them. Natalie subtly nodded to Victoria. It was time. Victoria leaned in conspiratorially and started gossiping loudly enough for Stephen and Anthony to hear every word. "Natalie, guess what? I ran into a friend who works as a nurse at the STD clinic. She told me something awful. There's a terrible, incurable disease going around. And guess what?" Victoria widened her eyes. "She told me in confidence that our downstairs neighbor is on their list, and a young girl from the building supply store just came in with the same thing. Can you believe it? She's so young, and she's already caught it. So Natalie, if you're going to the store for more materials, be careful. Her last name is Volkov, and she's the one who's been messing around with married men." Natalie pretended to be horrified. Oh my God, what kind of people are these, running around and then spreading diseases? Thank goodness none of us are like that. She turned to the men with a sweet smile. "Right, boys?" Anthony and Stephen, stunned by the news, sat frozen with their mouths open. Natalie acted as if she didn't notice their shock and cheerfully added, "You've gone quiet. You must be hungry again. It's been a while since we've had such a nice dinner with all this renovation work. Oh, you two are such hard workers, spending so much time at the cottage. Victoria, let's go to the kitchen and cut some more snacks for the boys." The women slipped out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar so they could watch the men's reactions. Stephen and Anthony immediately started frantically texting their mistresses, glancing nervously at the door. Anthony muttered under his breath, "This is all your fault. You bragged about cheating on your wife right under her nose, and I followed your lead. Now look what's happened." Stephen snapped back, "You're the idiot. You hooked up with that old hag who's been with half the neighborhood." Behind the door, Natalie squeezed Victoria's trembling hand. "Quiet. Don't give us away. We'll find out the whole truth now. Anthony groaned. I didn't even want that mistress. Victoria's always busy with the kids and ignores me. Now I'm stuck with this disease. That neighbor probably gave it to me. They'll put me on the list, and what if I've infected the kids? Now we'll have to spend even more on treatment. Stephen, you owe me for this. Stephen shoved him angrily. Back off. I'm not giving you anything. You're a loser who can't even support his family, but you went after a mistress. You've dragged me into this mess too. My wife almost caught me sneaking around at the cottage with Lena. Anthony shoved him back. I can handle my family. At least you've got it easy. Natalie supports you. You bragged about taking money from the account and buying gifts for your mistress instead of materials for the cottage. Anthony yanked the keys out of his pocket and threw them at Stephen. Take these. I don't need your stupid keys anymore. But before the keys hit the floor, a manicured hand caught them. Natalie had had enough of hiding. She stuffed the keys into her purse, though she wanted to hurl them at her husband's face. Natalie glared at the two men with contempt. We've heard enough, Victoria and I. You're not men, you're animals. You have no conscience, all you do is lie and cheat, and you even stole money from your families to spend on your mistresses. You'll pay for this betrayal. It's going to cost you dearly. Anthony, you won't see your kids again. Consider them traded for that old hag. And you, dear husband, I'm going to destroy you. Natalie grabbed a heavy fruit bowl and hurled it at the men. Get out before I throw you out myself. Anthony bolted for the door, not even noticing Victoria as he rushed past. Stephen, however, made a dash for his expensive laptop and started shoving it into its case. Fine, I'm leaving. I'm sick of you, you control freak. Natalie yanked the laptop bag out of his hands. Go! But you're leaving with nothing but the clothes on your back. What about the laptop? You gave it to me for my birthday. It's mine, Stephen shouted, but he backed away under Natalie's furious glare. It was bought by my father and gifted to me. I've kept all the receipts, so if it comes to court, I'll win. The apartment is mine, the car is mine, and the cottage is mine too. You're a stupid Don Juan, and everything belongs to me on paper. All you've got is your empty head. I hope Lena enjoys having a broke, homeless lover. Natalie slammed the door behind Stephen, then stormed into the bedroom and pulled out a drawer full of his underwear. She threw open the window. Stephen was standing below, still in shock. Natalie dumped the pile of boxers and socks onto his head. Here's your property. At least you'll have something to wear when you go to court. After that scandalous evening, Natalie divorced Stephen. She sold the cursed cottage because the unfinished house reminded her too much of her husband's betrayal. The only time she saw Stephen again was in court during the divorce proceedings. With the help of a good lawyer, she managed to keep almost all the assets acquired during the marriage, as she proved they had been gifts from her parents. Victoria, with the help of her friends, found a good lawyer and won the apartment for herself and the children. Anthony paid child support faithfully and begged for forgiveness every day, trying to win his family back. But Victoria refused to reconcile with him, knowing full well, once a cheater, always a cheater. The mistresses, along with Stephen and Anthony, became the laughingstock of the town. Co-workers at the building supply store, doctors at the clinic, neighbors and acquaintances all chuckled as they shared the story of the cheating husbands and their mistresses who had panicked over a made-up disease. Natalie and Victoria, on the other hand, moved on with their lives. They had learned the hard way that trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. But they also discovered their own strength and resilience. Together, they had faced betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. And as for Stephen and Anthony, they learned that actions have consequences. And sometimes, those consequences come with a side of public humiliation.